Morning, everybody. I'm super excited to welcome Mark Bartlett. Mark, welcome. I know Peter from our team has been talking to you for a bit, and you have a pretty exciting venture going on. So I'm super excited to talk to you about that. But before we get going, you want to take a minute and introduce yourself?
Sure. Yep. My name is Mark Bartlett. I'm the co-founder and CRO of Hire Clarity. We're a recruiting technology software, which we'll talk about more shortly, I'm sure. My background's a little bit different. I spent 13 years in the Australian military. I was a soldier for 3 years, then a naval officer for 10 years, then moved to the United States in '05, where I had to reinvent myself. Was in the staffing industry for a while, and then I've been in enterprise software ever since.
That is amazing at such a diverse background. So first of all, thank you for your service. But going back to the beginning of it, why did you end up joining the military?
I love that question because I think it's pretty similar to a lot of people who serve. I was a university student in Melbourne, Australia, studying in engineering and was lost and didn't know what I wanted to do, whether I wanted to be an engineer or not. And I ended up joining the Australian Army with a couple of buddies, almost on a whim. But I'm so grateful for the experience because it gave me so many skills that are now transferable to the commercial world that I may not have ever gained or gathered if I hadn't have taken that route. So yeah, it wasn't a big planned thing or anything like that. It was just, I'm not sure where my life is going. I'm going to join the military, and that's what happened.
That's amazing. I have had, a few guests, servicemen and women that have transitioned into sort of civilian life. But I wanted to kind of go back to that structure that you went through. Yeah. If you have to look back at that journey, and you were there in the service for a bit, right?
Yeah, so it was interesting. It was 13 years, so 3 years as an enlisted soldier, and then I transferred to the Navy. I went to the Naval College in Australia, got my commission, and was an officer in the Navy. So I look back at that structure and that discipline and the communication skills you learn, not only just from being any type of military member, but also being a leader as an officer for the last 10 years. Clear, concise communication and getting your point across and helping influence people to get to a common goal. All of that stuff that we always think about when we talk about military leadership, a lot of that was transferable and it was really good structure.
Yeah, our organizational development person, Mike Shantigian, he was in the service. Of course, he retired several years ago. But it is quite amazing to see the structure and the discipline and especially the communication skills that he brings in. So let's go back a little bit. Were you deployed overseas or you predominantly?
I was. It was interesting. I never deployed when I was a soldier, but in the Navy, my almost 10 years in the Navy, I was at sea for 6 years. The interesting thing about the Navy is when you're at sea, you're always deployed. You're always operational, whether it was fisheries patrol or immigration interdiction. And then I did 1 tour of Bougainville in a peacekeeping force, and then 4 tours of East Timor. From the very start of East Timor, when we were the United Nations peacekeeping or peace enforcement force, we went in, we liberated East Timor in 1999, and that was very intense and very rewarding all at the same time. And I did 3 subsequent tours after that. So all 5 operational deployments in addition to being at sea and doing all those fun things.
So East Timor, I think some of us who have been around know that story a little bit from outside in, and you were sort of inside out. So I know we're going to talk about partnership, especially going in and getting deployed with multi-country force. Can you walk us through that journey a little bit? Like, how was it like?
Oh, it was fantastic. I often think about that experience and think about how the skills that I learned on a few of those deployments really helped me like now. So my first 3 deployments in East Timor were at sea. I was an executive officer of an amphibious ship. So we were doing resupply and transportation of troops and material, etc. But my final tour, I was on the ground in the United Nations, they're not allowed to say intelligence. So they call it military information. So I was on the ground as a political analyst. And so in our headquarters, to get to your point, there were 75 members at the UN headquarters in Dili, which is the capital of East Timor. Out of the 75, there were 27 different countries represented from all different parts of the world. And it was a fantastic experience. And a quick anecdote, I remember as a part of the military information cell, we would be the first people up in the morning for the morning briefings, and we'd talk about the intelligence picture. We talk about politically motivated groups, and we'd actually do the weather as well, which was kind of funny. And I remember after my first presentation to this group of 75 international people, an Australian colonel pulled me aside and said, "How do you think you went, Mark?" And I said, I think I did well, sir. I think I delivered all the information appropriately. And he said, "Well, only half the people understood half of what you said. Slow down." So that was a lesson in slowing down and communicating clearly for folks who don't have English as their first language and so on. I mean, and that's a small anecdote, but working just in my intelligence cell with 7 different countries represented: Thailand, Singapore, Korea, New Zealand, Australia, Portugal, Portuguese lieutenant colonel who was my boss. Having to understand each other's culture, how we work together, our philosophies, it really opens your mind to working with different people. So it was awesome. It was really good.
Yeah, I wanted to go to that second part. Like, first is, of course, communication, as you said, but then you have to connect and then kind of appeal to their cultural base to align with the goals that you have. So how do you take, a group of people that are coming from all over the country, all over the world, and they haven't worked together, and you're giving them missions possibly to a great extent, they're dangerous in nature. And how do you, what is that process like?
Yeah, the process is, it's interesting because you've got the culture that comes out of a country, like an Australian culture, a Japanese culture, whatever it may be. But then you've also got the military culture within that culture. So it's a subculture, if you will. So understanding the cultural differences and being open-minded, which is the most important thing, about how people operate differently, communicate differently. Some military cultures, or most military cultures, are very direct with their communication style, which we can all, I think, helps in that environment because there's no hyperbole or fluff. It's okay, this is the situation, this is how we're going to execute this is how we understand what's going on. So I think being open-minded and understanding that your way of doing things, in my specific case, you've actually got the Australian culture, you've got the Australian military culture, and then you've got the Australian Navy culture, all in within yourself, and then you've got to understand everybody else's point of view and perspective. So I think that was the biggest learning point for me was, hey, Australians are very proud in the military. We think we operate very well and we do things, in a great way, but understanding that people do things differently and adapting and embracing that was the most important element of operating in a United Nations environment, if you will.
Can you talk about a moment where there were conflict because of cultural misalignment, even though communication was clear?
Let me think about that one. I mean, there were different incidents and events that happened during my last tour that there was a lot of conflict at that time, a lot of civil disturbances, a lot of activity, creating a very dangerous environment. And I think when you're in that intense environment, it creates situations where you have to make decisions very quickly and you have to understand each other. And I think so that broke down all of the barriers, if you will, to how to communicate because everything has to happen quickly. I think was sometimes misunderstandings where your interpretation of an event or an incident was different to someone, say, one of my good friends was from Thailand, and his understanding watching the same situation that I was watching was a little bit different because contextually he had seen different things happen, I had seen different things happen, and your point of views, even though you're observing the same thing, may be different. So it's helping each other understand what we were seeing through separate sets of eyes and then really coming together to say, okay, we can agree on these things, we can disagree on these things, and that allowed us to focus more. If that's a good example.
So when you take that and you bring it over to sort of so-called civilian life in corporate, right, and you work for an amazing brand like SAP, how does that translate? Like, what was the first day like? I mean, did you make like a jump, like was it a black and white switch, or did you go through interim roles and assignments that gradually kind of eased you into?
Yeah, it was an interesting journey and it wasn't all great. I think a lot of people who served, who then transition out into the civilian world, it's very challenging and difficult. And we've talked a lot already about communication and the directness of the communication in the military. And then moving into civilian life, moving into a commercial environment where that direct way of speaking may not be appropriate, even if it's with good intent. So as I joined the civilian workforce, and for me, it was even, I would argue, more challenging because I was not only leaving a military environment of 13 years, I was also moving countries. So I left the Australian Navy, and 3 weeks later, I had started my new life in the United States in Seattle. And so I went in with an open-minded mindset, all the things that I'd learned, but it was still challenging. Just being a little bit curt, being too direct with certain things, and you have to moderate and adjust that and slow down, frankly, because it's not potentially life and death or safety issues or anything like that anymore. Like on a naval ship or on the ground in a conflict zone, you're in a corporate office environment, so you've got to adapt and you've got to really pivot the way you think, the way you communicate, the way you act. And that takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not a 1 and a 0, a binary switch, if you will. I mean, you've got to practice it. You've got to focus on it. You get frustrated, and it takes a little bit of time. And it's different for everybody. Some people, they can hit the switch and adapt instantly. It probably took me 2-3 years to really adapt and slow down and, again, embrace the civilian corporate way of doing things.
So now that you kind of look back at that transition, right, are there things that you kind of kept because they were roughly the same and you would be more effective in this role if you maintain those? And are there things that you said, you know what, this is not going to apply, I got to change?
Oh, wow, that's a great one. I think being clear and succinct with written communication, I mean, that's kind of a boring example, but in the military, there's no room for hyperbole, even with written communication, even with administrative tasks and so on. It's all very just to the point and so on. So I think from a written communication perspective, that was absolutely transferable. Clear and concise ways to communicate in the written form, that was transferable. Having the confidence to present in front of large groups and communicate clearly, that was transferable. I think what wasn't transferable was kind of the regimentation and the structure and the intensity of how you perform certain tasks. That one, you had to be, again, more open-minded, slow down, and embrace all comers as to what they were bringing to the table from a thought leadership perspective, etc. So written and verbal communication in the right environments, absolutely transferable. Decisive decision-making when needed, yes, transferable. But then listening, being open-minded and taking time to make good strategic decisions, that was a journey.
So we both have kids.
We do.
So we're going to come to that and then we'll go back to, recruitment and other great stuff that you're working on. So when you look at those two distinct experiences with some overlap, right? The military and sort of the corporate life, how do you parent as a dad? Like what happens there? Which element do you lean on more or less depending on the situation?
I think so. Just to add some more color, my children, well, I've got one adult now. My oldest is 18. She's going off to college on a rugby scholarship, which I'm very excited about in the fall. And then,
I want to go back to one of sort of my great hero and mentor, Larry Bossidy, who passed away about a week ago. He ran Honeywell, Allied Signal. He was an incredible leader from the Jack Welch, school. And he used to say this all the time, that it's all about people. And the way we understood is that there is no such thing as a company. It's just a group of people wanting to do something for customers, that they care about through process and structure and, tools and et cetera, right? So when you look at this sort of life experience that you've had on the military side, on the corporate side, and raising incredible kids, when you bring that down to sort of an essence of humanity or human beings, right? We all show up to work to succeed. I have never believed that people show up to work to fail or, not work. They just get disengaged and whatever happens. So when you apply that framework that you have lived through, when it comes to talent, right? Mm-hmm. We'll get into the methods and the company and everything you're setting up. Can you walk us through in those three experiences. One is, in the military environment, how you select, how you coach, how you build. In corporate, how you do that. And in case of your kids, you didn't have to hire, they were in your lives, but you put, I'm sure, an infrastructure together around them that made them successful. Can you walk us through those journey, and then we'll come back to the great work that you're doing?
Definitely. I'll take it, the three elements, one at a time. If you think about the military, it's interesting. As a military leader, you are not selecting. If you're an officer on a warship, or if you're a soldier in a platoon and you've got soldiers coming in or sailors coming in, you're not selecting them. Okay, they've been selected by, in my case, the Australian Defence Establishment to come in as candidates, and they go through their training. By the time they get to you, they've had their basic training, and then their trade training, whether they're a communicator, whether they're a weapons handler, whatever it may be. So, military leadership and coaching and development, I said the word earlier, it's regimented, because it has to be. It could be life and death. It doesn't have to be a combat scenario. That was thing in the Navy. You're on a big steel can in very dangerous environments just because of weather or whatever it may be. So the coaching and development is still regimented. People have to know the sequence of events and the structure to execute tasks. So it's a very dogmatic way of coaching and developing. I think we touched on it earlier, but each military is different. Like, even the US military is different than the Australian military. The Australian military, I think we give our soldiers, sailors, and airmen probably more ownership. And so there is that personal coaching and development to help them succeed in their tasks they've got today and for the future as well. I'm not saying that doesn't happen in the United States military, but I think we're a smaller sort of force. So the leadership is slightly different. So you've got strict regimented leadership and coaching and development, and then you've got the softer side of it as well. The Navy is very interesting. You're all living on a ship together in the middle of the ocean. You have to get on well. You have to not just be a dictator or an autocrat. You have to embrace that you're working with humans, to your point. It's people. So even in military, there's definitely that people connection that's super important. Start of my career, I wasn't very good at it. I think when you're early in your military leadership career, sometimes you lean too heavily into the protocols, the rules, the regulations and so on, because you don't have the actual personal confidence to be able to influence and persuade. That comes with time, which takes me to the commercial side of it, which is it's exactly what you said. It's all about humans. Everybody's a volunteer to be on that corporate ship, to blend the two metaphors together. And they don't have to be there. They can leave it anytime they want, but you want them to be there. You want them to develop. You want them to succeed. You want to coach, etc. So you really have to understand the individual. And whether it's situational leadership, understanding how everybody's motivated differently, understanding those motivations, coaching towards those, that's all very, very important. And that's the biggest, well, I wouldn't say biggest difference. There are parallels, but in the commercial world, leadership development, selection of people, which kind of ties into the recruiting and staffing world, whether it's internal talent acquisition or external, you're selecting people and you're hiring people who you think have potential to join you on that journey to make that company successful. So from the very beginning, you're selecting the people that would be a good culture fit, that have the right skill set, and then you're developing as you go. So it's arguably much more enjoyable because it's from the very beginning, you're selecting people who you think will be a good fit for your team. Children that the family side is funny. You plan to have children most of the time, and you get what you get. Your kids are all different. They've all got slightly different DNA, and you love them dearly from the very beginning. And then working with them and helping mold them and helping them learn from all of the tough lessons you've learned, that your spouse has learned. That's the whole leadership by example thing, I think is true in every one of those environments we've talked about, but with children, absolutely. They can see you make mistakes. They can see you have successes, and helping them understand and being vulnerable with your children, being vulnerable with your staff, being vulnerable with your shipmates. I think that's the common ground where confident, strong leaders are humans and they can be vulnerable and they can help others around them learn from those successes and those mistakes. So that was a long answer there, but hopefully that was helpful.
No, that's fantastic. So do you see this more of a continuum that in the military environment, you have a lot of control, but you don't get to select? And then you're somewhere in between, I guess what I heard you say in corporate life, you get to select, you have some level of control or putting together a framework or incentives or whatnot. And then when it comes to kids, you get what you get. And then you have some semblance of a control, or you think you have a control. Like, is that the continuum you're describing?
I think control is fleeting in all of these environments, right? And so I think coming alongside those that you're leading, whether it be children, soldiers, sailors, airmen, colleagues, employees, I think it's coming alongside them and sharing your experiences so we can all learn together. I think that's the common factor with all three. And I think that's the common factor with all leadership in general, which I'm very passionate about. Like, I've made so many mistakes in my leadership career. I've had some successes, but it's true. It's all experiential, I think, for either the person who's learning or the leader. So.
There is a stat in one of these business books. I'm not exactly sure where I read it, but more than 70% of the companies started by founders in their 40s. And the reason they do that, because they want to have more control of the outcome.
Yeah.
Right. So, and when you become a founder, you realize you have very little control. You don't have control over your hours. You possibly don't have control over your outcomes because you're making tons of mistakes.
Yep.
You don't have control over, you think you want to hire, you don't, because you don't have the access to talent that you want to have. So all of the paradigms that you wanted to control, you find out you have no control.
Yep.
But in the end, at the heart of that is the people who eventually sort of select you to work with, not you think you're selecting to work with. So talk a little bit about that framework, that, this whole talent recruitment journey that you have sort of begun. Maybe you can describe a little bit, but I really want to kind of delve into this whole notion of how do you control the outcome of a company by controlling the talent that you pull in? Because at the end, it is a reflection of who you are as a founder, but most importantly, who is with you to execute that, right? So can you sort of go back and describe what you're doing now and what the intent is, and we'll kind of delve into this.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I think the company that we're building, Hire Clarity, is to help solve some of the selection challenges that folks are having in recruitment. And then you think about ourselves as a company and building a company and bringing the right talent in. So if we think about it in two different ways, if we think about from building a company. Now, to be clear, I'm new to this. We're 15 months into our journey at Hire Clarity, my first time as a founder. So I've been an executive in startups and so on, private, Series B, venture-backed, and then obviously public companies as well. So I think it is my first time at it, right? And so I think about how do you attract the talent, how do you build the talent, etc. It's what you said, Saugata. It's you got to find people with the passion to achieve the same goal as you and your co-founder and so on. So that cultural element, understanding what your culture is, building on it, attracting and bringing the right people in who share that belief or that culture or that understanding of what it's going to take to be successful, that's obviously really important. Yeah, and that being said, you've got to have the right skill sets too. I mean, just because someone believes in what you're doing and they don't have the right skill set, obviously it's not going to work out. So that's my belief in building a good culture and then attracting the right talent, to your point, because we're not just selecting, they're selecting us as well. It's absolutely true. It goes both ways. If you are not communicating your vision, your goal, your understanding of how we're going to work together, if that's not attractive to someone, then they're not going to join you, even if you are attracted to them. So that's that first element. And we think about the product and what we're doing is with AI, it's giving us an opportunity to combine all of the human elements of talent acquisition and recruiting combined with technologies to make us more efficient, to give us deeper insights, to really understand someone if we want to bring them into our company. And that's not just our company. Our product is for whether it's internal talent acquisition, whether it's for staffing agencies, executive retained search, anyone can use this. And we think about what is the talent like, what is the funnel? What does it look like? Now, I'm a sales guy, so I'm always looking in funnels. The top of your funnel is demand generation and attracting talent, and then sourcing that talent. Now, there's so many different technologies out there doing a great job of that. And there's so many, if you think about, say, LinkedIn, Recruiter, or whatever it may be, these are fantastic applications that enable you to attract and source talent, get them into the top of the funnel. And then you think about the journey after that. You are looking at screening, interviewing, assessing, again, both ways, candidate and hiring team. And then you get to this bottom part where you've found 3, 4, 5 candidates or finalists, and you've got to present those to the hiring team if you're a recruiter or a talent acquisition expert. And what we found was, and my co-founder Darren, is he's been in the staffing industry for 20 years. Most companies do it the same way. It's like, okay, we'll throw a resume over the fence and we'll write up a little briefing or summary note to say why we think this person's a good fit and why we think you should interview them. You think about that snapshot. You think about you as an individual or me as an individual and all the experiences we've had, or a recent college grad. It doesn't matter where you are in your journey. You may have had 2 or 3 interactions, and then a company has to make an assessment. Are they a fit? Do we want to work with this person? Do they have the qualifications and the skill set? Are they going to be a culture fit? Are they going to work hard? You've got to make that assessment with very limited information. So what we believe is all of that good work, from sourcing to evaluation to assessment, it needs to be synthesized. And using generative AI, laying over the top of that, all of that information and data about people, you need deeper insights to make a better call on whether they're a fit or not. So bringing together interview transcripts, resumes, LinkedIn scrapes, whatever it is that the candidate consents to share, you need to bring that together, synthesize it, so you can make a good decision on whether they are going to be a culture fit, are they qualified, etc. So what we're doing is, my co-founder is going to laugh when he's watching this because I always do the same kind of visual, if you will. If you think about the recruiting funnel, all of the things we talked about, sourcing, assessment, evaluation, right down the very bottom of that funnel, before you get to selection, is your finalist presentations. So if I'm a hiring manager and my talent acquisition team internally is done all of their great work and they've given me 3 candidates to look at, having the ability to use modern tools and technology like generative AI to say, out of these 3 candidates, what are the gaps in their skill sets, right? And for that to be presented to you in 10 seconds to say, Sagata's got a lot more experience than Mark, and these are the reasons why, and this is where he's worked, this is where he has worked, etc. It gives you at your fingertips access in a natural language way to access all the information and get responses really quickly. And it's all in one place. So at High Clarity, what we're doing is it's just a simple link. That link gives you a great, delightful, polished presentation. Click on the video, watch the interview video if you've got one, look at the resume, look at the LinkedIn, and then be able to ask questions about their job fitness and an automatic analysis as to whether they are a fit for the job or not. We think it's a difference. It's a differentiator for internal talent acquisition teams, for staffing agencies, staffing firms, and executive search, because they're not just throwing over a resume with some surface level information about why they think Sagata is a good fit for this role. They've collected a lot of information. They're showcasing their work. They're doing it in a branded way. And then they're giving the hiring manager the ability to interact with that information and get deep insights in their own time. So it's
so Mark, I want to go back a little bit to your own journey and come back to this notion of insights.
Yeah.
So when you think about the sort of the 2 amazing sets of experiences that you have, one is with in the military, and second is in the corporate life. In the military, kind of listening to you, and I've also heard this from other servicemen and women, is that it's very mission based, right? There's something appeals in you join for that mission, and in the corporate life is, of course, you're focused on your career goal, growth oriented. You're sort of self based, but you also care about the company you work for. So, but if I use like a two asymmetric words, one is missionary, another one is mercenary. The what you're looking for, right, are very different elements, right? If I'm a startup, I'm possibly mission based. Of course, a company like Google and Microsoft, they're very much mission based. But how do you sort of sift through talent to align, which bucket they fall in, and is it even a criteria you one has to worry about?
Oh, I love that question. I've never been asked that. I love the metaphor or the analogy that the missionary versus mercenary, and it's interesting because in my civilian life in the last 20 years, I've been sales, individual contributor, and sales leader, and executive, etc. And if you think about just that function of salespeople, arguably many people in the sales world are mercenary, right? They're motivated financially to maximize their wealth, etc., which is all fair and good. And so if you think about a startup, to your question, do you want to hire mercenaries or missionaries? My argument would be you'd want to hire the missionaries with a mercenary element, in the sense that
at least till I've figured out what you're doing.
Yeah.
Till that.
Yeah, that's
So now with that as a framework, let's say if you know roughly, what stages of growth you're in, and maybe you need a combination of both. Maybe at the core you need missionaries, at the context you need the mercenaries to I don't know what strategy book based on the growth cycle you're in you have to follow, but once you know that, in this age of AI, are there possibilities that you can leverage the AI to figure those out, or you think in the end it is going to be a human element and the blink that's going to play out a role?
It's got to be a combination of both. It really does. In the staffing industry right now, or talent acquisition world, if you go on LinkedIn, there's multiple thousands of arguments every day, both ways. I would say that the career and passionate staffing folks, of which I'd put myself in that category, it's a combination of the human element and technology. Because I think if there's applications and products right now which are fully automated interviews using AI. Now, there are some great products out there where the AI is human-like and it's hard to differentiate between them. But does AI have intuition at this point? I'd argue no. Who understands humans better than humans? Probably no one. So using the AI technology to be able to analyze and understand information and data and make you more efficient, I think that's the place for AI. Where the human element comes in with talent acquisition is what you and I are doing right now. So if you think about this from an interview perspective, and I talk to recruiters about this all the time, the very first part of any conversation, whether it's a sales call, whether you've met someone at a coffee shop, whether you're on a podcast with someone, what are you doing? You're establishing bonding and rapport. You're establishing a human connection. If I've got a human connection with you, Saugata, you and I are likely to share more information. We're probably going to relax and be more vulnerable and be able to share our experiences, our wins, our failures, our successes, etc. If you're interacting with a non-human, even if they're behaving in a human-like way, you're probably not going to be as natural or relaxed as you normally would to really showcase who you really are, arguably. I mean, what are your thoughts on it? I'm actually kind of very curious to see what your thoughts are on that, because it is the obvious argument to have right now with AI and humans, especially when it's about talent acquisition. But I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
So I'm going to answer it through a question, but let me kind of put it in a framework from the great background you've come from. Through a technology lens, I follow this incredible conflict that's going on in Eastern Europe, between Russia and Ukraine. And if you see the warfare, apparently how it has changed over the last 3 years, it is all drone based now. And in 1 month you hear Ukraine has a leg up because they have figured out a way, deploying AI with these drones. Another month, now you're hearing Russia has a leg up, and it's sort of a cat and mouse game in a very unfortunate way. So when you take that, it's basically technology versus technology. Who has an edge for a little bit, right? And through my friends here in Silicon Valley, I've been hearing about these application tracking systems but also there are agents now that candidates are using to apply, to multiple sites, multiple ways. And there is already, I have seen applications where the recruiters are avatars. They're doing the basic screening, and the candidates are being asked to record their videos in response to that avatar. So to me, seems like, it's the same analogy getting played out, because the volume of application that you can make and opportunities that you can find are exponentially greater, because in the previous flat search index-based job search modes to here were semantic and multidimensionals, right? So to me, almost my question is it going to be like, bots interviewing bots, and then you narrow down a list of candidates, and then you and I get on a call for half an hour. We talk about how we raised our kids together. Or like I don't know what dimension people are we going to leave aside the functional pieces to the bots and the human pieces to I don't know how this is going to play out, but it seems that way. It's edging.
Oh, it's exactly what's happening. And you mentioned the conflict in Europe. I mean, you're describing an arms race, which has happened in every conflict known to man, back to Roman times, through World War I, World War II, and modern conflicts. It accelerates technology, in that case, war fighting, etc., and drones using AI. And then the analogy to staffing. I spoke with an ex-colleague of mine from SAP, and she is a solution consultant / solution architect, and has been in staffing and is now doing something different. But we were talking about that, and it's this conflict. If you think about the arms race in your metaphor, you got candidates just doing their best to try and get a job. They'll do anything they can. They'll use applications to apply to 1,000 jobs in little time. And then you've got the talent acquisition people now having to use AI to be able to sort and filter and screen through that, just to get to the 20 people who they believe can do the job or will do the job. And so it's a continual escalation at this point of AI. And so we have to ask, I love what you said. It's like, well, a bot's going to be talking to bots, and then finally the humans come in at the end to work out whether they're a good fit. Well, I think that's absolutely potentially, I shouldn't say absolutely potentially, that's a bit of a contradiction. That's potentially what is happening and could be happening. The irony of all this is humans are getting overwhelmed on the talent acquisition side, right? Because now with folks using ChatGPT or anything else to create their resumes, everyone can appear to be a good fit, right? So the bot is looking at, well, not a bot, the AI is looking at an AI-created resume. It's going to tick a lot of boxes. So how are you going to determine whether a candidate is actually qualified or not? I would argue that the only way you could do that is what you and I are doing right now. Because the other thing is, even when you've got, if it's AI talking to AI or it's AI talking to human, if you've got the AI element involved with a human interview, the person's responses may be different. Is the AI going to be able to determine today whether my body language has changed, my eye contact has changed, the way I've started to communicate has changed because I'm uncomfortable, because maybe I'm stretching the truth with my experience or whatever it may be? At the moment, I don't think it can. In the future, and I'm not sure I'm using the word properly, but if it becomes sentient or, if it's able to really understand everything, there could be an argument that in 3 to 5 years, yes, it could do that and it could replace humans completely. I would like to think, as a fellow human myself, that we will always understand each other better, the nuances, the body language, everything we do better than technology. That's true today. Is it going to be true in that period I just determined? I'm not sure. So we need humans involved at this point is kind of my final point on that.
Well, with that, Mark, I think I'd love to have you back and see where these things end up in a year, how much, involvement has increased from a human perspective versus AI perspective. But it's been an incredible discussion. Again, thank you for your service. Yeah, it's incredible to have a conversation.
And thanks for the opportunity. It's been wonderful. Yeah, I'd love to be on again as we continue our journey. We're excited. about what we've got, combining AI with humans and seeing what we can come up with to help people find mission-driven folks to execute their vision. So thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. Thank you.